The morning sun filtered through the blinds of First Community Bank in Raleigh, casting soft stripes across the polished floor. At 62, Marcus Tate moved with a steady grace, his posture a testament to decades of discipline forged in the U.S. Marine Corps. His graying hair was cropped close, his face lined with stories he rarely told. Dressed in a simple flannel shirt, khakis, and worn but clean boots, he carried a leather satchel containing his military discharge papers, VA documents, and a single photo of his late wife, Lena. Today, Marcus had one goal: to open a savings account for his grandson's college fund. The bank was quiet at 8:45 a.m., with only a faint hum of conversation from a couple of early customers. Marcus approached the reception desk, where a young teller, Emily, offered a warm smile. "Good morning, sir. Someone will be with you shortly," she said, gesturing toward a row of chairs. Marcus nodded, taking a seat and resting the satchel on his lap. He glanced around, noting the mundane rhythm of the bank: a woman depositing a check, a man in a suit checking his phone, and a janitor sweeping near the entrance. Everything felt ordinary, and Marcus expected this visit to be as straightforward as the one he'd made years ago in Atlanta. After a brief wait, a voice called, "Mr. Tate?" He rose and followed a woman into a small office. Cynthia Reynolds, the bank manager, was in her late 40s, with a sharp blazer and a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her desk was pristine, save for a single pen and a stack of forms. "Please have a seat," she said, her tone clipped but polite. Marcus sat, placing his satchel on the desk and sliding out his documents. "I'd like to open a savings account," he said, his voice calm but firm. "For my grandson." Cynthia nodded, barely glancing at the papers. "And what brings you to our branch?" she asked, her pen hovering over a notepad. Marcus explained that he'd recently moved to Raleigh to be near his daughter Aisha and her son, Jamal. He wanted a local bank for convenience. Cynthia's eyes flicked over his flannel shirt, lingering on the frayed edges of his satchel. "I see," she said, her tone neutral but her gaze sharpening. She picked up his military ID, holding it to the light as if inspecting a rare coin. "This is your identification." "Yes, Mum," Marcus replied, sensing a shift in her demeanor. "That's my DD to 114 and VA card, too." Cynthia's lips pursed slightly as she flipped through the documents, her fingers pausing on the discharge form. "These look dated," she said, her voice trailing off. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "They're from 2008. I retired after 30 years. They're supposed to be dated." Cynthia's smile tightened. "Of course. Let me verify a few things." She stood abruptly, taking his documents with her, and stepped out of the office. Through the glass wall, Marcus watched her approach another employee, speaking in hushed tones. She wasn't typing or checking a system, just talking, her eyes darting back to him. Minutes ticked by, 5, then 10. Marcus's instincts, honed by years in high-stakes environments, prickled. Something was wrong. He'd felt this before, not in a war zone, but in quiet moments when assumptions replaced facts. Cynthia wasn't thinking about Marcus's service or his intentions. Her mind was elsewhere, caught in a web of snap judgments: the flannel, the worn satchel, the calm confidence in his voice. It didn't align with her image of a typical veteran. She'd dealt with fraud attempts before, or so she told herself, and something about Marcus set her on edge. Without checking his documents against any database, she picked up the phone and dialed 911. "I have a suspicious individual attempting to open an account," she whispered. "The documents don't look right. Please send someone." Back in the office, Marcus sat still, his hands folded. He'd seen this kind of scrutiny before decades ago in uniform, and later as a civilian. It wasn't anger that stirred in him, but a quiet resolve. He pulled out his phone and sent a brief text to an old friend: "Bank trouble. Call me." The recipient was General Evelyn Carter, a retired 4-star general who'd served alongside Marcus in Iraq. Their bond, forged in shared sacrifice, was unbreakable. Evelyn was in a meeting when the text arrived, but she didn't hesitate. She excused herself, grabbed her coat, and headed for her car. Inside the bank, the atmosphere thickened. Cynthia returned to her office, avoiding Marcus's gaze as she sat and tapped aimlessly at her keyboard, just confirming some details, she said, her voice overly smooth. Marcus didn't respond, his eyes tracking her movements. He noticed the way her fingers trembled slightly, betraying her composed facade. Outside, the faint wail of sirens grew closer, and soon, two police cruisers pulled into the lot. 3 officers entered the bank, their boots echoing on the tile. The lead officer, Sergeant Daniel Hayes, approached Cynthia's office. "Ma'am, we received a call about a possible issue with forged documents," he said, his tone professional but firm. Cynthia stood, folding her arms. "Yes, that's him," she said, nodding toward Marcus. The other customers in the lobby turned, some whispering, others pulling out phones to record. Marcus remained seated, his expression unreadable. "Officers, there's no forgery here," he said, sliding his satchel toward Hayes. "These are my documents. You can verify them with the VA or the Department of Defense." Hayes took the satchel, flipping through the papers with a practiced eye. His partner, Officer Lopez, stood by the door, scanning the room. The third officer, a rookie, hovered near Cynthia, unsure of the situation. Cynthia's voice was defensive now. "We've had issues with fraudulent accounts before," she said. "I was just following protocol." Marcus met her gaze. Protocol for what? For a man trying to open an account for his grandson. His tone was even, but the weight of his words hung in the air. Cynthia's face flushed, but she doubled down. "The documents look suspicious. I had to be sure." Hayes, still holding the DD-214, frowned. "These look standard to me," he said, glancing at Cynthia. "Have you run them through the system?" Cynthia hesitated. "Not yet. I wanted to be cautious." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Cautious about what, exactly? The fact that I'm here? Or the fact that I don't look like your usual customer?" The question landed like a stone, rippling through the room. Hayes shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. "Sir, let's step outside and verify this," he said to Marcus, his tone softer now. Marcus nodded. Standing slowly, "I'd like my documents back when you're done," he said, his voice steady but firm. As Hayes stepped out to call dispatch, Cynthia remained in the office, her arms crossed tightly. She hadn't expected this Marcus's calm defiance, the officer's skepticism. She'd acted on instinct, convinced she was protecting the bank. But now doubt crept in. Had she misread the situation? She pushed the thought away, clinging to her decision. "I did what I had to do," she muttered, more to herself than to Marcus. Outside, Hayes spoke into his radio, confirming Marcus's identity. The response came quickly. Everything checked out. Marcus Tate was a decorated veteran, honorably discharged, with no criminal record. Hayes returned, his expression apologetic. "Mr. Tate, your documents are legitimate. I'm sorry for the inconvenience." Marcus nodded, but his eyes stayed on Cynthia. "Inconvenience isn't the word I'd use," he said quietly. The lobby was now a stage, with customers watching openly. A young woman filming the scene whispered to her friend, "This is messed up." Cynthia's confidence wavered, but she held her ground, unwilling to admit fault. Marcus, however, wasn't finished. "You called the police because of what you thought you saw when I walked in," he said. "Not because of my papers. You didn't even check them." Before Cynthia could respond, the front doors swung open. A sleek black sedan pulled into the lot, and out stepped General Evelyn Carter. At 65, she carried herself with an authority that silenced the room. Her tailored coat bore the subtle insignia of her rank, and her presence demanded attention. She strode toward the office, her eyes locking onto Marcus. "You okay, Marine?" she asked, her voice warm but edged with steel. Evelyn Carter's rival shifted the bank's atmosphere like a sudden change in weather. Customers froze, officers straightened, and Cynthia's face paled. Evelyn didn't raise her voice or gesture wildly. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. She turned to Hayes, extending a hand. "General Evelyn Carter, U.S. Marine Corps, retired. This man served under me for over a decade. His record is beyond reproach." Hayes nodded, clearly out of his depth. "We've verified his documents, ma'am. Everything's in order. Evelyn's gaze shifted to Cynthia, who was now gripping the edge of her desk. "Then why is my friend surrounded by police?" she asked, her tone calm but piercing. Cynthia stammered. I was concerned about potential fraud. It's my job to protect the bank." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Protect it from what?" "A veteran trying to open an account. You didn't verify his documents. You didn't call the VA. You called the police." Her words were precise, cutting through Cynthia's defenses. Marcus stood quietly, letting Evelyn's presence amplify his own. He didn't need to speak. His friend was saying what needed to be said. Cynthia's voice faltered. "I didn't mean to offend anyone. I was just doing my job." Marcus finally spoke, his voice low but clear. "Your job isn't to judge people by their clothes or their skin. Your job is to help customers. I came here to start a future for my grandson, and you turned it into this." He gestured to the officers, the onlookers, the tension in the room. Hayes stepped forward, trying to de-escalate. "Mr. Tate, we're sorry for the misunderstanding. You're free to go, and we'll ensure this doesn't happen again." But Marcus wasn't looking at Hayes, he was looking at Cynthia. "This wasn't a misunderstanding," he said. "This was you deciding who I was before I even opened my mouth." The crowd in the lobby was growing, some nodding in agreement, others whispering. Evelyn turned to Cynthia. "You have a choice now," she said. "You can learn from this, or you can keep making the same mistakes. But know this, Marcus Tate is a man who served his country with more honor than you'll ever understand." Cynthia's eyes dropped to the floor, her earlier certainty crumbling. Evelyn handed Marcus his satchel. "Let's get that account opened," she said, her tone lighter now. Marcus nodded, a faint smile breaking through. "Yes, ma'am." The officers stepped back, and Emily, the young teller from earlier, approached nervously. "I can help you, Mr. Tate," she said. "We get it done right." As Marcus and Emily worked on the account, Cynthia retreated to her office, closing the door. The weight of her actions settled over her like a fog. She'd acted on a gut feeling, one she couldn't fully justify. The image of Marcus's calm resolve and Evelyn's commanding presence lingered, forcing her to confront her biases. She sat at her desk, staring at the blank screen, replaying the moment she'd picked up the phone. What had she seen in Marcus that made her so quick to judge in the lobby? Marcus completed the paperwork with Emily's help. The account was opened in minutes, and he deposited the first sum for Jamal's college fund. Evelyn stood nearby, chatting with Hayes, who was visibly relieved the situation hadn't escalated further. The crowd had thinned, but a few customers approached Marcus, offering words of support. "That was wrong, what they did," one woman said. Marcus nodded. "It's not the first time, and it won't be the last, but I'm still here." Evelyn drove Marcus home, the two sharing stories of their time in the Corps. "You didn't have to come," Marcus said, glancing at her. Evelyn smirked. "You think I'd let you face that alone?" "Semper Fi, Marine." They laughed, the tension of the morning easing. At home, Marcus called Aisha, telling her about the account and the day's events. "Grandpa, you're unstoppable," Jamal said over the phone, making Marcus smile. Back at the bank, Cynthia met with her regional manager, who'd been alerted by a customer's video posted online. The incident sparked a review of the bank's protocols and mandatory training on bias and customer service. Cynthia, shaken but reflective, began to question her instincts, vowing to listen before acting in the future. Marcus didn't dwell on the incident. He took Jamal to the park that weekend, teaching him about resilience. "Life's gonna test you," he said, tossing a football, "but you keep moving forward no matter what." For Marcus, the account wasn't just for Jamal's future, it was a reminder that his own strength, forged in service and survival, could still inspire.